Friends, it is good to see you on this day. This is September the 5th. Read through the word. I'm Wendy Pope. I hope that you are doing great. Hanging in there with Ezekiel, one of those major prophets, which means he had a lot to say. There's a big book. Ezekiel is a long book. In fact, I looked down and I was like, wow, we're still in Ezekiel. Okay. Maybe y'all are feeling a little bit the same way, but not long. Not long. We'll be in the New Testament. And I know everyone's excited about that. I included the New King James translation of our key verse because I felt like abominations was a little bit stronger than detestable sins. And that's just in my opinion. But God is bringing charges against these people. He's calling the religious rebels out. Israel did not care for the holy things that God had entrusted them with. The people that were in charge of keeping the sanctuary fell off guard. They did not take care of the sanctuary and the holy things and the clean things, the pure things of God. They allowed the detestable, they allowed the abominations to secrete themselves into the temple of God through their own poor leadership. They accepted bribes. They accepted sacrifices that weren't pure. They allowed weighing with weighted scales, various things. They allowed that's on a tame level. They allowed worship of other gods in the temple, and God is he's not going to take it, and he's letting them know, hey, I'm calling you out on this. They offered food that was for God's table to themselves and to others. They let fat be in the blood sacrifices. I'm just looking at some things that I had written down. And what we see here, our message out of this is that we will bear the consequences for our unfaithfulness to God. We will. We're not going to fall under the judgment as harshly as the Old Testament prophets and priests do, or the modern day church leaders. Scripture is very clear that church leaders and teachers of scriptures will be held to a different standard. But on the level of the average person going to church, we will rightly suffer the consequences and have to bear the consequences of our unfaithfulness to God. And I just broke down in terms that we can understand what these individuals were responsible for and the consequences that they were charged with. When we fail to nourish and protect the sacraments of our faith, we've got to protect our faith and nourish our faith and protect the sacraments of our faith. And I don't mean religious rituals like dunking or sprinkling or the Lord's Supper, whether you drink wine or don't drink wine, or whether you take the Lord's Supper to go or you pass the cup around, or those. I'm not talking about the rituals of that kind of thing. I'm not talking about that. When I say sacraments of the faith, I think of corporate worship. That's something that God calls us to in Scripture. Studying our Bible, allowing the Bible to transform our minds, the renewing of our mind. Prayer. Those are tenets and sacraments of our faith. That whether we dunk or sprinkle, or whether we drink wine or we have the to-go, Lord's Supper to-go, whatever that manner is, it doesn't matter how we do this level of faith. I don't even know what I'm trying to say because I don't want to use the word sacraments, but evidence of our faith. Maybe you'll call it that. Maybe that's a good way to put it. But we've got to all agree on at least these simple sacraments of worship, prayer, and studying the Bible. Those should be universal, no matter what is on the marquee outside of the road, beside the road, and for our church. So we've got to protect those, and we've got to nourish our faith individually. We've got to refuse. We bear the consequences of unfaithfulness when we refuse to guard our gates. We have to guard our gates. They did not guard the gates of the temple. They did not guard the entrances and the exits because they let any kind of unclean sacrifices in. They allowed false worship. They allowed idolatry in there. And when I say our gates, I mean our eyes, our ears, our minds. We've got to guard the gates of our temple. By the way, we are the temple of the living God. So we are responsible for taking care of ourselves. We've got to nourish our faith. We've got to protect the sacraments of our faith. We've got to guard our gates. And we are responsible for allowing personal relationships with people who have no heart for God. Now, they allowed relationships like this. It's obvious that they did because there were people bringing in false gods. And I'm walking a line here because I know that we're supposed to witness, not worship, but witness to others. We are supposed to shine the light in the dark. I know that. But to what extent are we allowing those that have no heart for God to be part of our lives and to speak into our lives and influence our lives? We're responsible for that. And we bear the consequences of our unfaithfulness when we permit idol worship. And we can say all day long, well, I don't have any idol worship. I don't have any idol worship. I believe on all level, we all have some type of false worship in our lives. Whether it's our children, our husband, our home, our pride. We can have false idolatry and permit idolatry of our church. We can have our faith as an idol. The Bible can be an idol, something that we, above all else, we throw it at people and we hold it up in regards, but we don't live it. Do you see what I'm saying? Anything can be an idol. And so we have to be truly careful about that, especially those in my line of work, so to speak, that my preparation for ministry can become an idol to the point where I neglect my family, my husband, my responsibilities as a wife and a mom to do ministry. No, then ministry becomes an idol. I know I've told y'all this story before, but when I was early on in ministry and people were getting published and their books were getting published and mine weren't, and I was upset with God because I'd been in ministry longer than them and I did more than them and blah, 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 blah. I'm not even repeating it all because it makes me nauseated. But I was driving down the road and the Lord showed me 4 pieces of paper and said, these are your books. And I felt like he was going, here they are. Now be quiet about it. I'm giving you a glimpse, but be quiet. But what I took that as, run, Wendy, run with it, run with it. And I remember spending time with my door closed and telling my kids they could not come in because I was working on my book. Oh my gosh, it makes me shudder and tremble inside. Informing my husband, I won't be able to cook dinner tonight because I've got to work on blah, 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 blah. Really? Ministry and my ministry work had become an idol. It can happen. Even the best things can become an idol. We are responsible, and we will bear consequences for our unfaithfulness to God, just like these men did. We can be religious rebels, and we've got to be careful. And how do we do that? We nourish our faith and protect the sacraments of our faith, because when we do that, we will stay humble. And humility is the first step in making sure that we don't have consequences to deal with because we aren't unfaithful. Y'all take care. We'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.